Hi, I'm Kate McQuestin from Global Australians, the global community for Australian ambition. We're a not-for-profit that believes we go further together. We are really proud to be uniting the 1 million Australians that are currently overseas alongside the 4 million Australians who have returned home. We are really concentrating on delivering tangible programs and outcomes for Australians so that we can unlock opportunity for Australians abroad and at home. One of our programs that we are delivering is the Career Pathway Program. We're delivering that because our research shows that of the Australians that are overseas, 90% of them would like to come home at some point, but only 15% have a clear pathway to get there. This is alongside data that shows that those that do return are finding it difficult to get back into the job market, and they're finding it difficult to really find their network and their crew when they do get home. So through the Career Pathway Program, we're hoping to overcome some of those strategic gaps that exist. And that is important because we really do want the skills and talent to return home. And we also want future generations to go overseas and have the opportunities that we had. But we need to view it as a circulation of talent and skills, and we need to have those pathways for them to return, because I think all of us want our kids to go overseas at some point, or if they want to, or at least have the potential to. So today I'm delighted to sit down with Sharon Mackie Goh from Talent Search Haus to go through what the job market is doing in Australia, and also what the implications of AI and other things are on the job market for Australians wanting to return, those that have recently returned, and how we can put our best foot forward to make the most of the opportunity before us. Sharon, thanks so much. So at the start of June 2026, what are the key insights that Australians overseas and those that have returned should know about the Australian jobs market?
Yeah, of course. So if I think about the last 6 to 12 months in the Australian market, it has definitely been a little challenging for a variety of reasons. And it's not just Australia. I suspect it's other major centres as well. You know, we have a geopolitical environment that is challenging. We have war. And of course, we've got the Australian economy that appears to be a little bit wobbly. But having said that, there are definitely pockets of activity in the market at the moment. The sorts of things that I would say, just as a sort of trends, if we think about employment, I think there's a few things that we can cover off with respect to permanent versus fractional versus interim versus consulting. I think right now, because there is uncertainty in the market, a lot of organisations are just sitting on their hands, just not sure which way they should think about investing in people. And as a result of that, they're probably doing less than what they should be. Having said that, I think that there is definitely opportunities around what we would call fractional, interim or consulting work. So bring in a senior person who has some particular skills that an organisation needs, but may not want to bring them on a permanent basis because they're just not sure what the future looks like. Or in fact, to some extent, they're just trying to manage their headcount and cost base at the moment. So definitely opportunities across interim and fractional. Fractional is part-time, as you probably well know. Interim is to come in and support the business whilst an executive is either on maternity leave or maybe in the midst of being hired, etc. So that's the interim piece. And then consulting, of course, where someone comes in and works on particular projects for a period of time. So I think that there are opportunities there. I think the biggest challenge for Aussies offshore is undoubtedly getting them networked back into the market. And I had an interesting conversation with a very senior person with one of the banks who suggested to me that when Australians go offshore, they might also want to think about ensuring that they continue to maintain their networks in Australia whilst they're offshore. Even if that means, once every 6 months reconnecting with people that they knew back here. In fact, coming back, when they come back at Christmas to see family and friends, to also spend some time re-networking, just to keep themselves in front of the network in Australia.
Yeah.
So I think that was an interesting observation, and I think it's one that if we think about the Australian market where networks are important as they are in other markets as well, that's probably reasonable advice.
Great. So overnight, we had an inquiry from the US. I won't identify the individual who is trying to return at the end of 2026 towards the start of 2027. He would like his daughter to have an education in Australia. It's time for their family to come back. We see from a research and data perspective that there are three triggers, one being work change, the other being when your children get to high school, the other being when an elderly parent or a loved one is ill. That will also be triggers for people to come back to Australia. And looking at that, it's very difficult to get traction with recruiters and companies back in Australia. Potentially global experience isn't valued as much. And I know that we've spoken about it at length, but, I would say we would probably get 50 applicants per week of people wanting to come home, but there are a lot of people per day saying that the challenge is valuing global experience. And just wondering from your perspective, as people prepare to come back, tips and things that they can do to really prepare for that move, to kind of sell their global experience back home, while we advocate for that, what they can be doing at a practical level to give themselves a head start.
Yeah, no, it is a tough one for Aussies offshore because obviously they work in larger markets. There's more complexity, and often they've got roles that are somewhat larger than what you might find within the Australian market. So I think it's important that when they reconnect with the Australian market, that they really look at that international experience and see how they can relate it locally. And some of that will be around, some of the complexity, et cetera, that they've operated under. But I think also as the market shifts, there's also a need to think about changing mindset. So it's all well and good to have had experience that you can talk to, but I think it's also important that they bring with them the knowledge that they've gained offshore to think about how that experience and mindset can be adopted into what the Australian needs might be in the future. So the sorts of things that I think are interesting, for people to be able to talk about the fact that yes, there's been complexity in the roles that they've had. I think it's important that they refer to the fact that they are prepared to have a very agile mindset in the context that they've had to kind of shift thinking, processes, etc., because things have changed so quickly within a particular role or environment that they've been in. So I think those sorts of things are important. Obviously, there will be job boards and LinkedIn where you can apply for roles. Look, the tricky piece with that is that, as we know, a lot of the technology that sits behind those applications is now AI driven. And so when we prepare a CV, we'll often get told to actually ensure that you put your CV through AI to ensure that it matches the job that you're actually looking for and highlighting the areas in which your skills and experience is aligned. So that's important, but of course what it does is it puts you all in the same bucket. So again, it's something that you have to do, you should do, but just be aware, it's not necessarily the best channel to ensure that you're going to get an interview because, again, given the market, some of these internal recruiters are looking at 100, 200 applications.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be mindful of.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that running your CV through AI, doing the LinkedIn thing, doing the job applications online is standard. But to have a point of difference, it is the networking. It is to get ahead in terms of the crowd, keeping your networks fresh while you're overseas and not letting them kind of go. So when you're coming back, making sure that you really do that extra by going and networking, going to the events, making sure that you are making appointments or going to meetings and coffees and things like that to get back into the market without being too aggressive, but looking for a job, with it just making a reconnection, I
Yeah.
suppose, coffee.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any particular sectors that are hiring more than others?
Yeah, look, I think that some of the SME businesses in Australia, because of what we're seeing in the market with respect to AI and the need to think about how can I look at my processes, our systems, and think about AI, I think that a number of these sort of SME Australian businesses, typical businesses that are owned by mums and dads, or they're industrial businesses, manufacturing, etc. They are definitely interested in people with transformation capability. So
Right.
they appreciate the need to think about what does the future look like, and they're keen to think about whether there is a need to bring in somebody who can help look at ways in which they need to transform that business. And that often will come back to customer, data, digital, analytics,
Yeah.
and potentially, eventually, AI in terms of supporting those changes. So I think there's a little bit there's some opportunity there. The other is if you just think about the trends, I think that increasingly there is demand at the engineering level within the defence space, and that's obvious just given where I think markets are moving globally. So there is definitely, it's a tight market globally for engineers, just because every country is looking to bring back their talent, knowing that obviously in Australia they need to be Australian citizens.
Yes. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So therein lies an opportunity, so to speak. And then I think obviously if you think about, what we're looking at the moment, data, AI, clearly again are skills that the Australian market is looking to secure. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that skill in the Australian market. So there again, opportunity if Aussies want to come home, because they're bringing something that we just don't have at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. We support Australians that are going overseas as well. It is important to us, and I think your son's overseas. My children have spent a lot of time overseas. It's a real opportunity to kind of go overseas and get global experience. That circulation of talent is super important. As in globalization has kind of increased, there are a lot of people that are working from Singapore and other markets that are working for Australian companies. And the others, would you encourage people to still go overseas and have that time, even though there are some difficulties with coming home that we can see, and we're obviously all working together to combat that? How do we really make sure that that ambition and chasing your ambition as a global community for ambition, how we can harness that and empower that for young people to go overseas and get the experiences that both you and I enjoyed in our time and careers?
Yeah, it's interesting. Aussies get a great hearing overseas. I don't know whether it's our work ethic or whether it's our accent, but I know of a number of Aussies that are offshore, and, they are constantly being called by recruiters, headhunters in the markets in which they operate to think about switching roles and work for those businesses. So it's interesting that, we obviously are well received offshore. I think we're just easy to work with. We come in with maybe rose-colored glasses, but we come in with a desire to do really, really well. And so Aussies are well respected in the markets offshore. And I would encourage young Australians to go and spend some time in those larger markets, because the exposure and the experience will be invaluable. And look, how long do you stay overseas? I mean, that's obviously a personal thing. I think that it's easier sometimes for young Australians to go overseas, spend maybe 2, 3, 4 years, and then come back. It's probably a little easier for them to integrate back into the Australian market. But, that again is also just because I think that to some extent there are often more opportunities at that sort of more mid-level, as opposed to the senior jobs in the Australian market.
Okay, great. So definitely encouraging people to kind of go overseas for that experience, but also when overseas, keeping their networks alive and connected, and then not to lose confidence if things aren't moving when you're abroad, because it is a bit of a tough market at the moment in terms of getting traction.
It is a tough market, and look, it's important if they're overseas to start making contact 6 months beforehand. Ideally, demonstrate to a recruiter or a hiring manager that they would be willing to fly back to interview if that's required, but to try and level the playing ground so that they are included in a process as much as a local person might be included in a process.
Yeah, excellent.
So try and remove that barrier, demonstrate that flexibility. I'll be on a flight next week if you need me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you so much for all your support. We really value how you approach our partnership, the time that you give Australians that are overseas, the endless calls that you've had with talent that's trying to return. I'm very grateful. It doesn't always happen with people in your space, and we really appreciate it. So thank you
No,
very
that's my pleasure. Thank you.
Global Australians is delighted to be connecting Australians all around the world, both offline and online, connecting them by their location, their career stage, their sector, and their interests. To join, simply head over to globalaustralians.org. Membership is free and would love you to be a part of it. Hope to see you soon.